Hi everyone. Wow, what a tough one to follow after David. He was like the cannabis guru on stage and kind of like almost the Tony Robbins of cannabis. That was pretty incredible. I do have to say, I want to chime in. When I was an employee in the industry, I started my business and I registered my business, got a business card, built my website, all while I was an employee before I even stepped out there.
Good for you.
And I never even went to business school.
Good.
So my name is Jenny Germano, and I am the owner and founder of ICS Consulting Service here in Denver, Colorado. I've been in the regulated cannabis industry now for 11 years. I got my start working in dispensary operations. I guess what they call OG. So I started in 2009, and this is before before the Marijuana Enforcement Division was even created in our state, where they were regulating us. I was working in dispensaries back in the old days. Basically, even as part of my employee training, I had to get raid preparation training. I had to be prepared for when we could potentially be raided. In our dispensary. We were all very scared back in those days, and I'm sure in other states they might be as well. And there wasn't a day that did not go by when I was unlocking that door at that dispensary where I didn't think a gun could be pointed at the back of my head, and that could either be someone robbing me or it could be the federal government raiding me. So that used to enter my mind every day that I would enter into the dispensary that I was operating. So I basically managed dispensaries here in Denver for about 6 years, all for different companies, probably staying with each company maybe a year and growing and moving up to the next job level. I helped convert a medical, grow, and a dispensary over to a recreational store in 2014. We were one of the six or seven licenses approved in the state that time, so there were only a total of 7 dispensaries open in the entire United States at that time that could serve adult use. In the dispensary I was the director of operations was one of those dispensaries. So I would probably say that we had thousands of people waiting to get into our facility. We were doing like 100 customers an hour. I had at least probably 7 or 8 bud-tending stations. We were serving. Actually, Jared Polis came into our dispensary when he was a congressman, and Cheech and Chong, you can name it, CNN, everyone came in our dispensary, and it was a really wild time, and I feel extremely blessed for my experience. So in 2015, I started my business because I realized there was this niche that I could do as far as compliance, because I was in the trenches as an employee, and I was seeing the gaps. I was seeing where there was a space that needed someone like me. There was a lack of employee training. There was a lack of compliance knowledge. In fact, when I became a compliance officer, there was nowhere to get training, and I was, for people who are old school who might even know this terminology, but back in the old days, they had a group called Act for Colorado, and I was attending those meetings, and I was the only employee, and everyone else there was an owner of a dispensary or a grow. I was the only employee showing up to the meetings, begging to get as much compliance knowledge as I can, because I realized that I wanted a career in compliance. A little bit also about my background. I have 23 years in commercial kitchens, and then I transitioned over to cannabis in 2008. It took me till 2009 before I could get a job. And my first job, I worked for free in the industry because nobody would hire me because I didn't have any knowledge. So I said I would work for free, and I did that as a receptionist. And then I worked at 2 restaurants in Denver at the same time. So I worked 3 jobs to get my foot in the door. So I've been in business about 5 years. And what I do is I prepare people for operational readiness. So I go in and I help people launch their cannabis operation. I do not really help with more of the business end or financial or investing or anything like that, but it's all operational. So I come in and I onboard their employees, I train them. I train them on the importance of compliance. I'm also a technical writer, and I do a lot of application writing out of state, and I help people write their operating plans. So all my services are definitely all operational focused, and I come in, I can audit a facility, and I can tell them whether or not they're in compliance or not. and I prepare them to be audited or inspected by their state inspector. I'm kind of the person that prepares them for all the things that they're going to be coming up against, and I tell owners the truth. I let them know the pitfalls. A lot of people will not tell their clients the pitfalls in the industry, and I will always tell my clients the risk that they're taking and what they're getting into and what to look out for and what compliance complacency is. And so all these really important things. And I'm just going to kind of share a list of best practices I put together today for preparing for compliance in this regulated environment. And so I'm specifically talking about THC, marijuana, not hemp. I specifically work with licensed facilities on the marijuana side, and I think right now I'm in 7 states, and I'll pretty much go anywhere anyone wants me to go as long as it's legal. So preparing for compliance. So my first best practice is you want to invest in compliance right out of the gate. A lot of times people say, oh, well, I want to spend $100,000 on marketing, and I want to put this money into that. And then you see their list and you say, well, where's compliance? Well, they put it way down here, but at the end of the day, compliance is what is going to keep your business opening. Without compliance, you have no business. You're not in the market of growing and processing and selling cannabis. You're in the business of compliance first before any of those things. You have to have compliance in order to have all those things work, because if not, you get shut down. And I see people go under all the time. And their number one thing I believe they struggle with, and this is including facilities that I worked for that didn't want to be in compliance, and I would leave, they would go out of business a year later, all based on violations, because they didn't want to fix the things that were out of compliance, or they want to do dabs, up in their office while you're getting MED inspections. And so we can compare stories, because I knew there were employees doing dabs in the closet because it wasn't on the camera. So I have a lot of fun cannabis industry stories. Another thing is invest in your team. When you don't invest in your employees, you're not investing in your business. And I'm telling you, if you don't invest in your employees and your team, you are going to be a revolving door. You're going to lose employees left and right, and it's not going to stop, and you're going to bleed money, spend more money getting employees in and out the door than you would just investing in them and training them. So building your team. If you're building your team, I always recommend, everyone's like, I gotta get this cannabis expert, or I gotta, go find the best, best manager that's ever run a dispensary. Not true. When I was running a large retail operation, I had 100 employees under my belt. I actually hired people from regulated industries. I didn't care that they didn't have cannabis experience, because I can teach that. I can teach them how to work in a dispensary. I can teach them all those things. What you cannot teach is someone that has 20 years of regulated experience in manufacturing, in healthcare, in the restaurant industry, in oil and gas. Those backgrounds, I think, are so important for our industry, because they already know what it's like to work under a regulatory microscope. So don't be afraid to hire outside of the cannabis bubble. I think it's a really good thing, because I believe you can just teach anyone about the cannabis side of the operation, especially if they have those skill sets. Let's see. Have a compliance officer. If you have the money, hire someone to be your full-time compliance officer. A lot of times, and this happened to me in all the jobs that I was in, I hired and fired. I was the compliance officer. I managed inventory. I did all the ordering, for merchandising. I had to do the schedule. I had to do payroll. Oh, and by the way, I also ran the Facebook page and did all the posting and the Instagram. Oh, and had to interview all the employees. And oh, that's right, you didn't have SOPs, so I wrote all their SOPs. Oh, you didn't have an employee handbook? I guess I'll write that too. I can't tell you the millions of hats that I wore as a manager in this industry. So have a compliance officer, keep it separate. Don't just pile on the manager and make them have to do, a million things, because what happens is that you can't be focused on compliance, and you miss things. Even myself, I missed things until I got out of working in these licensed facilities, and I just started focusing on compliance, and I was like, holy cow, like I was so buried and overwhelmed, and I was only a $12 an hour employee. That's another thing, is pay your employees good money. You can't expect someone at $12 an hour to manage your whole entire compliance of your multi-million-dollar facility. Multi-million-dollar facility, here's $12 an hour, manage my compliance. Please don't do that. Let's see. You want to also create and implement a compliance program. You know, how are your employees going to even know what compliance is if they have no context? You have to have some type of compliance program. Even if you're a small business, that's fine. If you're a startup and you as the owner, you're working every single day that it happens, you know, start working on it now, but at least when you start hiring employees, make sure you have that and ready to implement. You know, a lot of companies, it'll just be the owners working, and they're like, oh, well, we can't afford to do the employee handbook, or we can't afford SOPs, and we can't afford this and that, because we're bootstrapping this, and we're doing it all on our own. But then what happens is a year later, I come back, they got 20 employees, they're making, you know, like $1 million a month, and I say, hey, where are your SOPs, and where's your employee handbook? Oh, we're too busy for that now. I'm not gonna lie, I get told that all the time. Now we're too busy to write the SOPs. Now we're too busy to implement the employee handbook. But now you have 20 employees. Some are gonna quit, some are gonna collect on a call, and then you have to pay them unemployment, and then you're just gonna have this big HR mess on your hands. So you definitely wanna make sure that those are the things that you take care of. You wanna have your day-to-day operations mapped out. The best that you can. There's some people that have no idea how to run a dispensary, and they get a license and they, woohoo, I'm gonna open a dispensary, but I have no idea what I'm doing. Well, then you're gonna have to hire someone like me or another consultant or another person who has operational experience that can help you map out your day-to-day operation plans, because that is a big contributor to compliance. You also wanna self-audit. I think self-auditing is really important because that creates a culture of compliance. You have to know what it's like to have an audit, and also self-assessing will tell you where you're at in your facility, whether or not people are adhering to the rules and regulations. But additionally, on top of that, you want to have a third-party person come in and audit you, because outside eyes are the best eyes. A fresh set of eyes. I'll come in for an audit and people will tell me all the time, you're never gonna find anything. And I say, that's just not true. That's just not true. I mean, I will find something, including if you take your license that you were awarded by the state and you staple it to the wall, I'm gonna call you out on that. It might not be in compliance, but you sure as hell better put that in a frame so when the regulators walk in, you look like you know what you're doing, because you better frame your state awarded license. And I've seen them stapled to the wall. I'm not making that up. I really have. Literally, all their business paperwork stapled to the wall. Also, I think it's important to train your employees every quarter. You just don't train your employees one time, onboard them, and that's it. You should do it every quarter. So much can happen in between every quarter within a year. There should be so many changes, SOP changes, so you wanna make sure that you definitely train them on that. Ensure all your employees are exposed to regulations that pertain to their job role and facility type that they work in. It doesn't matter that they make $10 or $9 an hour. I don't care if they're the janitor sweeping the floor and emptying out the garbage. They should understand some kind of aspect of compliance that has to do with the facility that they're operating in. That person taking out the trash could mess up something with waste procedures. They could mix marijuana waste with regular trash and not do it properly. So you really do have to make sure that you're training as it relates to the regulations per that job role. Also, I think it's important to invest in a health and sanitation plan and product handling training. Boy, did COVID ever expose the cracks in people's foundations. At least that's what I think, because everyone was like, shit, and running for the hills because no one had a health and sanitation plan in their business. Nobody was prepared for COVID, how to deal with it, how to get the employees trained properly. So I think it's really important to have some type of health and sanitation training for your employees, and also product handling, because employees can contaminate a product. In Colorado, we test the product, okay, and then it gets shipped to the dispensary. I open the big turkey bag of raw bud, and now I'm putting my grimy hands on it, and I'm packaging it at the dispensary. To me, that's where, and I use grimy just because I'm trying to more on a contamination aspect, but that's where we can get contamination. Is one, so what? It's been tested and you passed. Woohoo! You didn't. There's no heavy metals, no pesticides, nothing. But then it gets to the dispensary and it gets put into a joint and it gets put into a container. It gets put into a display jar, and you're still having contact with the product, and contamination can happen. So I'm sure your employees, actually, I would send them to a food safety course, and I think it's a great course that every employee should be trained on. Do not make health benefits claims. I think it was in 2018 in Colorado, they did an undercover investigation and they were calling dispensaries, and a woman was pretending that she was 8 months pregnant and wanted some help with her nausea. Well, employees were saying, great, this is what I use this, this, and this. It was actually an investigation that they put together. They were collecting data to see how many dispensaries were actually making health benefit claims. You cannot make those kind of claims. Honestly, you should always just follow the label and work with your vendor and that manufacturer to really promote exactly what the product's about, and you never make a health benefit claim. And then lastly, good record keeping practices. I audited a cultivation once and I said, hey, can I see your waste tracking records for some of your plant waste? I was given a folder that just had torn out sheets of paper, and they probably just random dates, random years, nothing made any sense, it wasn't organized, and I just said, would you hand this to a regulator? And they said yes, and I said no. You would not hand this to a regulator. You have to have good record keeping skills, and I understand this industry, we all spawned from the black market. We all came from the black market, and people just didn't have business skills. Well, now we're in a business. Now you're regulated. Now you have a license. You can't just scratch down your waste information on a napkin and hand it to a regulator. You have to be organized. And so I really beg of you to make sure you have really good record keeping skills, or hire someone that's good at organizing and having record keeping skills. These are all super important when you're working in this regulated industry. And I think that's it. Those are the tips I wanted to share with you guys today. And I really appreciate everyone being here. Honestly, this is my first speaking engagement in 6 months, and I've really missed being around people, and I feel really honored to be here today. And thank you, Michael, for organizing this, and of course, David, you guys were amazing helping Michael, and hopefully this helped everyone today. Thank you.
Thanks,